Hi, and welcome to the SEO Kitchen Show, the SEO webinar series where SEOs cook from around the world and debate in a fiery discussion how to balance out the flavors of their recipes and come up with the best SEO tips for their audience. I'm your host, Hristina Mangelova, Tina. And and I'm very pleased to welcome our four panelists today: Tomek Rudzki, Sophie Gibson, Tory Gray, and Nichola Stott. Um, Feel free to use the hashtag SEO Kitchen Show and ask questions at any time using the discussion box, and we'll answer your questions at the end. Uh, Now, let's jump right into it with our first question for today. Um, has anyone of you, dear participants, ever worked in house? What are the differences between agency and in house work?
I have, for one. I've worked in-house for about 5 years, I'd say. And the biggest differences from my perspective were, the investment in you from the executive team and whoever your boss is, especially in terms of learning communication skills and learning how to be effective and get work done. Also, like the depth of work over time. If you're at the same place for 4 years doing SEO, you're going to have to get a lot more creative than you might be at an agency, just trying to be inventive. And once you hit a goal, what's next? What's the next frontier? You've already hit 400% growth. What do you do now? And just getting that level of creativity. And the last one I'd say is access to data. I was able to learn at least some amount of SQL querying because I got access to the database, which is not something you always get agency side, unfortunately. And it's such a huge learning opportunity. So it was great for me. What about y'all?
Thank you, Tori. Nichola, do you have something to add?
Kind of, yeah. So whilst I've never worked in-house, I have worked kind of at an SEO, at a search engine. Yahoo at the time in 2005 was really a considerable search engine, although we might not think of it as such today, and certainly not in the UK. When we're doing SEO here, we don't really tend to talk about Yahoo in the same sentence as we talk about Google. But just to echo what Tori said there, that the significant difference there is the access to data, and particularly with regards to Yahoo, as you can imagine, the data at that side of things is the other side of the fence, really. So it's the macro data, if you like, and that makes it a lot more exciting, a lot more interesting, and it kind of governs that sixth sense that you need when you're learning and doing SEO at quite a rate. So yeah.
Very good point. Does anyone else have something to add?
So I was working in a previous company, and it was like in the middle of in-house and agency because they had a lot of internal projects, like e-commerce stores to do SEO for them. And I believe that the main differences is that with agency, you can really go deep into what's there on the website and like really master that. But with agencies, it's common to have tens of projects per person, and at one we do some kind of mix. So like one person is working on or two clients, so it's like in the middle. So we go into their Jira or things like that, and then we can work like in the middle of in-house and agency. And I see I I love working with like in agency because of different projects. So now I get one project from this niche, and then I get totally different projects. Of course, in-house you can have a lot of projects from various angles, but it's still like limited. I would say 10 projects, 20. In agency, you've got tons of different projects, and it's like, the pace is really fast. Lots of new technologies to learn, lots of new challenges also with communication skills, because in agency you work with same people, which is obviously good for communication, but with other clients you have to learn their own communication style, and it's always a challenge how to convince them to make to implement your changes and things like that.
Thank you, Tomek. Sophie, do you have some things to add?
Yeah, so for me, I started off kind of in-house, but I wasn't doing an SEO role. So when I first started kind of in digital marketing, I was being like a marketing assistant, so I was across a lot of things. So it's hard to say what's different if I was doing an SEO role. But I found for me personally, working in-house or on one business, like you do have the opportunity to go deeper on stuff, but the day-to-day can be very similar. So what I was finding, I was getting very extremely bored by the end of things, you know, because you were just working on the one problem and you had to, as Tory mentioned, you know, you've got to keep on being creative with the same stuff to try and get growth and such. So it was much, but by the kind of end of that, I was getting really bored, which is why I really like working agency side. And so I've been, the last 3 companies I've been in are all agency. So having such a variety of different work is what I really enjoy. So I think that's the main difference. Like you can learn a lot quicker, I think, because you're being introduced to so many different sites, CMSs, setups, business goals, and it just really helps, I think, with that learning process, just because there's so much to take in, and it helps people like me who can get a bit bored if they're just working on the same thing all the time. And that variety I find is super, super interesting to kind of work with agency side.
Thank you, Sophie. And thank you, everyone. Before we move forward, let's rewind the tape just a little bit and give our panelists the opportunity to introduce themselves. Hopefully by now, everyone has been able to join the session. So Tory, do you want to go first?
Sure. I'm Tory Gray. I'm the CEO and initial founder of the Gray Company. We are a remote strategic and technical SEO and data agency. And we work with startups and SaaS companies and a lot of subscription membership sites. I'm based in Toronto, and I'm excited to be here.
Awesome.
Do you want me to go next?
Yeah, go for it.
No worries. I'm Nichola Stott. I'm the managing director and founder of Erudite, and we are a also technical and strategic SEO and specialist agency. We are remote only, but I'm headquarters in Hampshire.
Wonderful. Thank you, Nichola. Tomek, do you want to go next?
Sure. So I'm a head of R&D at Walney, technical SEO agency. Also, I'm a co-founder of ZipTyDev, which is a tool helping you with indexing issues.
Awesome.
So that leaves me. Hi, I'm Sophie. I am the technical SEO director at Studio Hawk. So again, agency, I deal with a lot of, we have a lot of e-commerce clients, helping them become better on search. Obviously, I'm in charge of all of the technical stuff, so making sure that they are all spick and span so Google can view all the pages. That's essentially my job. Lovely to meet everyone and the audience today.
Awesome. Then we're just going to jump into the second question. What are some of the advantages as an SEO working as part of an agency? I think some of you sort of covered some of the points here, but maybe we should talk about this in a little bit more depth beyond what we said in the previous slide. Who wants to go first?
I don't mind. I guess I think something that we've all said, or I heard, as a common thread from everybody that's speaking here about the differences they've found with agency, that is that if you are one of those people that does thrive on variety, then agency life really is for you. Whereas some people might be really, it's not to say it's the opposite of methodical, but if you are a very methodical person, you might like to sit with one piece of work and sit and get it through until it's done. I think you've got to be able to multitask, and you've got to really enjoy multitasking if you're working in agency life. One day you're, let's talk in terms of chef hats, seeing as though it's the SEO kitchen show, but you've got to put on your chef's hat and be an expert and patisserie, one day, and then the next day you're head chef, or the next day you're working on poultry. So you've got to be the expert in absolutely everything to do with your client site, and be able to flip that hat really quickly rather than just do one thing very, very thoroughly.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
Yeah, I think it speaks to the diversity of the work that you do agency side versus, say, like the depth that you do in-house. You have a lot more breadth and a lot more repetition. So you get to practice things, the same sorts of projects over and over, which really helps you get good at that thing quickly. I'd also add, there are many advantages to working as part of an agency, but I'd also encourage people to explore both sides. I personally feel I am better at an agency because I've worked in-house, because I've learned to communicate better, because I've learned how to be successful in a product team and work with engineers and speak their language and communicate and empathize with their needs. So both have strong advantages, and when you are ready for fast-paced growth, maybe that's the time to move agency side, and when you're ready to work on your allegedly softer skills about how to get work done more effectively, when you're really ready to dig in there, then I personally believe that can be easier to accomplish in-house.
Yeah, so for me, I think working as a team and bouncing ideas off of each other is kind of what I really value I think is an advantage working in the agency side. I mean, you can get that in kind of bigger companies in-house, but sometimes if you're the only person doing SEO work, it can get a bit lonely, and you might have to create your own community to be able to kind of get around that. Whereas I find if you're working in an agency, there's a lot of people, there's a lot of peers to work off of, work from, gather other people's knowledge, sharing training with each other, improving processes that way. So I think really the fact that there's other people to bounce off of and work with is a really beneficial part of working agency side.
That's actually interesting to me, because I felt more of a team connection working in-house, but I also was embedded on a large growth team. So I wasn't the only SEO, and I certainly wasn't the only social media or product person. So
yeah, I'm sure it's not true for like every single in-house role, especially like I said, bigger companies probably do have more people, and then you've kind of got that team, but you get that kind of from the day dot in agency side.
Yep, so many options.
Yeah.
Tomek, do you have anything to add?
So yeah, mainly it's about variety of products you work on. So everything that comes based on that. So new technologies to learn and discover, new people to learn how to communicate with, and this is really the main point of that. Working on variety of websites, you can have, okay, this website has got indexing issues, this has got problems, I would say news SEO, so like getting the content rank in Google News, and this is totally another story, and then you can move smoothly and go through the whole spectrum of SEO. This is my main, I believe that is the main advantage of working as a part of an agency, at least for me.
And given that all of you panelists today have had some experience working in-house and also in agencies, so you're all well-versed in the pluses and downsides. What would you say is the number one difficulty with agency work, agency life? We hear this phrase quite a lot in the industry. And how do you approach this issue?
So I can start, I guess. So first of all, like I believe that doesn't matter if it's agency or in-house, it's getting things implemented. This is the number one because you can create the best audit and still you wait for developers like few months and then they say okay we will implement that but it doesn't work. So yeah, we approach that by like working hand in hand with developers. So we go to Jira, Trello, whatever PM they are using, and then it's totally different than you are sending them audit, like 50 page, 100 page of audit, and they say, okay, I will read that later, and it's very difficult for them to implement. So then you need to like to limit the number of steps between you and developer. So developer doesn't need to read the whole document, whole audit. You just give them clear tasks. Okay, so you have to do this, and this way, with like very short story, and they know how to approach that. This is our way, and I'm curious about you.
100% agree. I think I saw everybody's head nodding then. It's just a tale as old of time, isn't it? Getting your work actually implemented. And I think spiritually, it's a little soul crushing. And, because that's what we want. We are intrinsically hardwired to be rewarded as SEOs by seeing those numbers go up, by actually seeing the results. And I think the difference that additional step of being removed from the ability to get that result is a little bit frustrating for some. And just being able to hold your nerve and just try and get that pushed through, get those tickets prioritized, put it into, monetary loss or impact to get that over the line in terms of getting your ticket up the queue. That's the trick, but that's also the really most frustrating part, I think, because we just want to see those numbers go up. That's what we're built for.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's the time and effort that goes into proving that value. I find it's really hard to, you can put a number to it, but it takes so long and so much effort to be able to do that, to get it prioritized, which I know is, that's what we need to do to be able to prove our work. But at the same time, it's really frustrating when you're just like, I know this will work. This is going to help you. Like, why do I have to just justify this to go through? But yeah, it just reminds me of the, I think it was a thing at Brighton SEO where they did a poll about how long people have been waiting for technical implementations. And like some were saying like over a year. I've had it before where I've been waiting, like there's been stuff in a queue for a year before anything could happen, because at the time there was no internal buy-in for SEO. They didn't really know what, have that as a value in the business. So then you've got to do a lot of educating to try and get that put in. And there is a lot of effort that goes into kind of getting one thing ticked off your list.
100%. I mean, being influential is hard, period, but being influential and really depending on your contact internally and their ability to get things done in a business is a unique angle on it. I'd also add, you don't often hear the why specifically why not. If something on your roadmap doesn't work. I was in an agency for 4 years before I went in-house, and I went in-house specifically because I really felt like I was beating my head against the wall. Like, why won't they do what I asked them to do? And I just didn't get it. So going in-house, learning how to, adapt your conversation and like understand their needs and speak to them about how to help them win for their goals and their needs and the way that helps them grow within the business, establishing that, it's just really, it's a learning curve and it's a painful one, but it's completely worth it.
Would you say as well, Tory, it's not always so much a learning curve, but it's a cycle. Like you come back to it time and again, don't you?
Yeah, and you have to learn how to speak to different people in different ways. If you're talking to someone with a strong, Silicon Valley tech background, that's a very different conversation and language than if you're talking to, an executive or like a consultant background. How you be influential, how do you speak to their needs is just it can be very, very personalized. And that threw me for a curve. Like once I started speaking more strategy instead of just, this is my list of tactics to do, please do them. And engineering, right? Like that's a whole different, like if you're talking to a product person versus engineering, you're going to have a whole different deck. You're going to explain things in a different way. You're going to break it down to a different level. It is work, right? It's a lot of different work and a lot of repetition, to your point.
That is actually a very good segue, Tory, into talking about relationships with clients, what they look like, and what are the usual contacts you have with the other side being on the agency. So I think what the point you just made about, knowing how to communicate with different stakeholders is a very important one. So let's talk about that a little bit more. Anyone?
I could speak to this. So we very much love working with in-house teams. That's actually our target. It's not as if we won't work with a company that doesn't have an embedded team, especially if they intend to build that team over time. But we're often working in funded tech. So they have an investment. They already have buy-in to SEO. They already know that this is an opportunity for them and that they're willing to do work here. There's already people internally that understand, how to extend influence within the org. But maybe it doesn't make sense for them to staff someone that's really senior on the strategy side or really, really senior on the technical side. So working with an agency partner to fill that specific gap and really help their team grow and be more effectively. Like it's sort of an equation of how does it fit together. So our usual contacts are the marketing director or the VP of the team, where we're, sometimes the marketing manager, depending on the size of the org, and just helping them be more effective in getting all that work done.
If I can add a follow-up question to this, from personal experience, I've been in positions oftentimes where as my agency is working with another dev agency that the client has hired. So oftentimes I find that relationship not necessarily bad, but more particular to form. And these are people you end up communicating often in order to execute on the technical SEO elements, but at the same time, it's not as straightforward as the relationship contacts Tory just mentioned.
That can add a whole other layer of complexity, particularly I think if you're working with a developer agency and the developer agency also has a bit of a dabble at SEO sort of thing, then I think you can find yourself in a lot of sticky situations where they essentially think that you're trying to take as much business from them as possible.
Yes.
And that can become a little bit political, can't it? Or that there's some sort of they probably pitched. You don't know the backstory, so sometimes they pitched, they didn't get it. There can be bitterness there when you join a relationship like that, and it might not all be out on the table, and it can make things a little bit difficult. But I think that can happen more often than not.
I would say many SEO stories starts with when the developer says, "Okay, I can handle the SEO of this website." This is when a lot of SEO stories happen.
And it just wouldn't happen anywhere else. Like I don't think you'd have it where your gynecologist would say, I can have a dabble at brain surgery. It's just, it doesn't happen anywhere else. We're all little skilled professionals in our own right. Day in your lane.
I love the analogy, Nichola.
It's a good one.
Indeed.
I seem to find that you kind of two main kind of contacts depending on the size of the site or the client. So I find for smaller companies, you're probably working directly with the owner. So you're working with someone who has like a bigger stake in the business, who does everything. And I find for those kinds of people, there is a lot of contact and there's a lot of education that you need to do with those people to help them understand what you're trying to achieve and why what you're doing is helping towards that. But I think at the same time, they're usually quite responsive and they're willing to try new things because they've hired you as the expert. So I think that's usually the best thing, and just slowly skilling them on, what they need what you need them to come to you about. Because I find it's so much easier when somebody comes to you saying, we're thinking about doing this. How will this affect us? Whereas previously they might have just done change and it's going to affect you, affect the site quite in a widespread way. But not to say that can't happen in any kind of company. I think that happens across many sizes and different relationships you might have with people. But I think hopefully trying to educate on that is really kind of key for that. And I find like in bigger companies, I typically find that I'm working with the e-commerce team or the marketing team, someone who's in charge of that particular part. And actually going back to the previous question, I find with those type of people, you've got to do a lot of work improving the value of that work to make that department look good and to make sure that you can get your recommendations implemented. Because usually with bigger companies, there's more kind of competition for the same development resource. So it's that kind of working with a smaller team and making sure that everyone's kind of working together and with like similar aims for those big companies.
Yeah, I think that's really key because for my end, I'm more typically working with embedded engineering teams. We also work with external vendors, but we less often run into the acrimonious situation and more run into the opposite end of the spectrum of they just don't care and they don't want to learn it. And they've got enough other things to do for sure that this is just one more thing that they don't want to deal with. So, my hack there is I married an engineer. So I learned to communicate. I can ask questions behind the scenes. I can say, what does he mean by this? Or she mean by this? And then I can take that back to the conversation and really work to win them over. That's often my first protocol with a new relationship is how do I make this person love me? Because I want them to deploy my changes, right? And that can be an interesting thing. But I think if you're successful at that, we've also had people like that were in an engineering team here that went off on their own and then they've hired us there, or independent developers. Once you can win them over, I think that can be a really powerful relationship because they do bring us leads. They do understand where we come. Like you just have to develop that trust. And let them, like, we're not here to make you look bad. We're here to set you up for success and help you do a good job so that the client is here for you. We're a team. We're in this together. Building those bridges is really critical.
So many insights. And we are at the 29th minute mark of our conversation, and it's time for the $1 million SEO question. What is the best way to get SEO recommendations implemented by a client? I say, let's try to make this a little bit more interesting and add to it by the most creative way you've ever used to get SEO recommendations implemented. I think possibly Tory is winning right now because she already married a developer. So you could count from that as creative, probably, but curious to hear what you have to say.
So some of companies are likely really looking at their competitors, so they're like crazy about that. So sometimes when you notice, okay, the client is crazy about the competition, then you can show them how the competitors implemented that and why they're winning over them. And then they say, okay, I want to chase that another competitor, so they get things implemented. But I don't think it's creative. It's just knowing the human nature.
There's a couple of things that we do at Erudite. So I'll talk about the financial and the non-financial first. So there's always that kind of financial argument, but to quantify and demonstrate the impact, there's two ways of framing that, I think, with SEO. You've got the opportunity, but you've also got the opportunity cost. So what happens if you don't do it? And what might that look like to your business if you don't do this thing? And sometimes that can be more demonstrable in terms of a loss, but then of course a snowballing loss, as is the nature, because then you allow somebody else to get a foothold into positions you might currently hold on to. So that's some way of bringing things to life. As well, to also get it over the line, we will utilize something like an ICE matrix. So what's the impact, what's the cost, and what's the effort required? And then we'll score each of those across that framework. So it might be something like improving the content so that it is marked up with structured data. So we want featured snippets, da, 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 da. That's what we're after. So what's the impact? What's really impactful? So it's a 5 out of 5. What's the cost? Well, it's a bit of work. It's not particularly difficult, and it's a few little technical changes here and there. And then the effort, again, not massive. So should we do it? Hell yes. But if we're looking at something that might be a lot more technical and maybe require 2 or 3 other external parties and expensive dev work, etc., then that might not be greenlit, even though the potential rewards could be further. So it's just putting something in a way that's going to give you smaller wins along the way.
Break it down into actionable chunks of work.
Yeah, and each one of those, well, we could do 10 things, and if we say 10 things and put 10 tickets in, nothing's going to happen. But if I show you 5 and I put it in some sort of ICE framework with an opportunity cost, then I might get 4 out of 5, and that's amazing. So
yes, I agree. I have found a lot of my clients, especially ones who are not very familiar with SEO, to get very overwhelmed when we present the SEO audit and they see all of those opportunities. So it's a mix of excitement and weary of how are they going to get all of these implemented. And to your point, prioritization really does magic.
Yeah, all of these are really great options, especially Tomek. My favorite one is getting those competitors in, because I think it's nothing like to fire under someone's butt by saying someone else is going to grab this from your hands, and they go no. But what I also like to do is make it as easy as possible for people to implement your recommendation by making it obvious exactly what you need the client to do. Because I find sometimes that when you writing out recommendations, it sometimes isn't not completely clear, like the exact steps, what you need someone to do. You have all the information about the particular problem that you've got and why it's a problem, and the fix might be a lot of things. But by making sure that you've kind of got a column which says action to take, like what do they need to do? Do they need to copy this column into this place on their CMS? It could be something as simple as that. But just making sure that especially if you send off a spreadsheet with a bunch of recommendations in and they don't come to it to a week later, without you explaining it, is it still clear what you want them to do? And sometimes I find like even now, that's sometimes what I've forgotten to make sure in that. So that's kind of like the last step once I've gotten all the recommendations kind of detailed out, or however you want to format them, just a final overview of, is it clear what I need them to do? And sometimes, that can really help.
Yeah, I 100% endorse all of these answers. So I'll take a different direction. My funny answer is bribes, cookies. Joking, but also it's true and it works. Remember that these are people with needs and they have their own goals that they're trying to hit. So build bridges, build connections. This is a service industry. Nobody's going to do anything for you if they don't like you and if they don't trust you and they don't feel you have their back. You have to bring the insights and set them up for success. You have to bring empathy and you have to bring value, not just to show your own value, but also to help them understand how that means that they're providing more value to their boss. So how do you help them trust that you're going to do good work and that you're going to make them look good? That's really critical.
Yeah, I think that's 90% of the job, trying to make other people look good, really.
Now that we got the $1 million question out of the way, fast forward into a land far, far away where we can imagine what the ideal agency role is in SEO.
Can I ask a clarifying question, actually? Now, I've just seen that written there, not in black and white, but in sort of orange on a white background. Can I just clarify, do you mean an individual job role, or do you mean the individual role, like the role of an agency in the world? Or are you talking about the person that makes the tea? Like, what, do you know what I mean?
Yeah. The way I'm interpreting this question is the ideal place for an SEO specialist within an agency.
I also emailed this to ask beforehand, and that was the intended question, but we can cover both. Why not?
Does someone want to buy me some time then while I think of my answer?
Not too much time, Nichola.
I'm not sure there's any objectively better role within the agency. So again, I'm going to go the silly route and say my role, because that's why I made my role like I made it. Because I like it that way. I like to be in charge. I like to control my schedule and who I work with. It's pretty magical.
Own it. That's it.
Tend to agree there, Tory. Yeah. I also think it appeals again to the part of me that really does crave that kind of variety in everything and doing a little bit of everything. That the sort of overseeing and helping others to fulfill and reach their potential.
100%.
Yeah, and also I believe that it's about the person. One person wants to go up and up with junior, senior. Some of the people want to go, like I would say, other ways. They want to get not like sometimes they getting managers. Sometimes they don't want to be managers because they don't like managing people, but they want to specialize in SEO. And there is in SEO there is room for both of kinds of people. You can be manager or you can be a separate specialist. So you don't need to define, okay, this is the best way, but this is not. It's all about if you want to manage people or not. Also, Tori said about her ideal role, that is her role. Same here. I work as head of R&D, so this is more about discovery, what's going wrong with Google, what's going wrong with website overall. And this is the role I love. And this is the role I can get more information and like checking indexing problems, checking JavaScript SEO problems, like going deep. This is something really, really interesting and fascinating. So I believe everything depends on the person. One person like this, and we cannot objectively say, okay, this is the best way, and this is not. All of that depends on the person.
Mm-hmm. Agree.
Yeah, I'm going to go a bit abstract with my idea, but I think obviously it's deeply personal to each person what kind of an ideal role would look like to them. But I think some of the kind of key features of that is making sure you've got room to grow, that you've got time to work on personal development stuff, and the chance to work on what you find interesting. So, do you want to lean more into the technical side? Do you want to lean more into the content side? Making sure that you're able to work on the kind of different topics that you find really interesting. I think having enough freedom to be able to work without immense time pressure, people pressure over the top of you, but still having support for the areas that you want to work on, and like just making sure there's pleasant people and the clients that you're working with are all really nice, because I think there's nothing worse working in an agency where you've got a particular client that's a problem, that's rude, or that you really struggle to get stuff done with. So I think as long as you've got all of those things, you can make it how you want.
Love that.
Thank you, everyone. Well, time does really fly by because it's time for QA. Looking forward to seeing what questions the audience has for us today.
Should we have a quick chat about what recipes we picked while we wait for questions?
Oh, yes, let's do it.
Yeah, I went very classic for a beef bulgogi. BBC food. It's one of my favourites.
Oh, thank you, Sophie. We actually do have a question. Are agencies able to sell SEO services on their own, or is SEO often a part of a package? What are any trade-offs?
I mean, both. Depends on the kind of agency. I've worked at development agencies that had embedded SEO teams to help the websites that they created be more successful. And then you're selling it often as a part of a broader package, like you're redesigning the site, right? And then you're deploying it. But we have a dedicated SEO and data agency, so that's the services that we sell. I don't know that there are trade-offs. It's just the right fit for you and your org and your needs right now.
I think, to my mind, this comes back to, is SEO a marketing service? I mean, if we think SEO is a marketing service, arguably we tend to find that SEO is either a standalone or sold within an agency that sells digital marketing. Or there's the inverse, and then you've got more of the SEO as a kind of a computer science UX side of things, which arguably it also is, which is where you get SEO evolving out of dev houses. And there's neither a right or wrong, really. But you might find differences if you're shopping for an SEO agency yourself, and this might be why the question has come up. Then you might want to think about what type, if you were to put it into one sort of pigeonhole, what type of agency might I get best with? Where am I deficient in? Is my UX brilliant and my site is brand new? Maybe I'm looking more for a more marketing specialist agency. Or if the inverse is true, you might be looking more for a more UX hot SEO agency.
I would add that if there is demand, there is service. So, for instance, we frame us as technical SEO services, and we don't sell links, we don't do other stuff. We just work as technical SEO help, either with clients or other agencies, and we don't need to sell anything else. We just go with the service that people want. So this is how I approach that question.
Yeah, so it can be either or.
Yeah, like I can see a lot of companies that sell SEO services as a package with some other services, especially when it's part of marketing. So there is Google Ads, SEO, but there is room for like specialized services too. So I would say.
Yeah. Next question we have. Do any of you have a favorite type of website to work on? By favorite type, maybe we can also think about industry type.
I've got to go straight ecom. Any e-commerce site, you selling a product, I will happily be there. I think there's just, maybe it's just because I like online shopping a lot. So I think maybe that goes it.
To me, the answer isn't the type of the website, but rather the level of like the problems on the website. So when there's a huge website and having lots of problems, then there is challenge for me, and I was really happy. But even if there is some like the type that I like, but has like barely no problems, this is not a challenge. This is not interesting. So I would say the answer is not the type, but rather the level of issues.
Oh, I thought you said product at first, Tomek. You said problems. The more problems.
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree with you there. The more problems it's got, the more fun it is. Yeah. It's true.
Yeah, I mean, similar to that, my favorite are probably complex tech stacks or complex business requirements that they have to figure out the right way to balance the business needs relative to how they want to excel with SEO. So one client example is a mortgage lender that has one website and the admin controls over 200 different websites that are for the different loan officers. So the complexities and how do you make the right decisions at a global level that deploy out and still create a quality website? How do you curate good quality within that as well to balance, really scalable versus the high quality, answering those really big, juicy problems? Or, we specialize, for example, in JavaScript stacks, Jam stacks. So it's similar to your all's answer. It's just like juicy problems and juicy opportunities for really trying to define what's next and how can we leverage technology to make that happen.
Thank you all. Maybe we should give a couple more minutes to see if there are any other questions. And in the meantime, continue the recipe discussion. And I can go next. I'm originally from Bulgaria, so what I included as my favorite recipe is traditional Bulgarian banica. So this is lasagna-like, but with thinner layers, and it's with eggs and cheese, and it's delicious. And it's a super great snack that you can also take on the go if you're going hiking or if you're traveling. It's like a sandwich, but better.
It looks incredible. I've just Googled it. It looks great.
I'll post the links, Sophie.
My recipe was a recipe for fool. It's a Lebanese dish, often cooked for breakfast. My aunt, when I was young, was married to, she lived in Lebanon and was married to a Lebanese, my cousin is Lebanese or half Lebanese. And so I had a version of that you could make with American cuisine. So it was chickpea based, but it's kind of like a hot, chunky hummus that you eat with like cucumber and green onion and tomatoes and pita, and it's just really fresh and there's no meal you can eat that you like walk away from just full and just feeling physically good. It's weird. Usually food you enjoy doesn't make you maybe feel so good. So it strikes a nice balance there for me.
Sounds delicious, Tory.
Breakfast food is the best food, I would say.
Well, we seem to have no other questions from the audience. So I want to thank you all for joining today's panel discussion. It has been a wonderful conversation, and time really does fly. I do hope it opens the door to more questions, questions to ask your teams, to talk to clients and coworkers, because really this is discussions like this make us better, and it's important to be part of the community. So thank you all very much for joining. I do want to say another big thank you to and from the Oncrawl team, and all of you speakers, of course, for organizing today's events. The recording of the webinar will be sent to all of the participants in a few days, so keep an eye out. There are a couple more episodes for anyone who's interested in participating in the next. We have the spicy SEO and search intent. So we'll see you there, and thank you so much for joining.
Can we quickly get Tomek? What was your recipe? I need to know.
Okay, so it's capsalon, which is like the meal from Netherlands, which is basically French fries. Then the meat and salad. So yeah, you combine it, like one great meal, and it's just like very tasty, and you don't feel hungry after that meal. Yeah, I highly recommend it. It's called capsalon.
Capsalon. Oh, yeah, I am definitely hungry now. But yeah.
Well, it was great meeting all of you.
Thank
you
you.
too. Lovely to have you guys.
Go grab some breakfast food. Don't be hungry.
Bye now.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.